Camping with the Dogman, or Dogman looked into my RV. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I want to say that my wife and I have gone camping every single summer of our marriage other than the year 2020. I might be wrong about that, as for parts of our first 5 years together, we both worked 2 jobs at a time. We've basically been out in nature in our RV as often as we could manage for the entire 29 years, and in all that time, we only had a problem with a cryptid once. The thing is, it was a really bad cryptid, a dog-headed man, and the problem we had with him lasted more than a night, more than a week, and for a time, I became worried that it wasn't ever going to end. We're friends these days with 2 other couples who have had similar situations where a dogman decided to follow them around for a month or 2. We each refer to it as our Summer of Dogman. I'm going to tell you about mine. Now, my wife we can call Marge and I both share an interest in cryptids. When we were kids, we each separately wished we could encounter a Bigfoot, although we had both learned to be fearful and wary of Sasquatch long before we even met each other. We had both heard of the Wisconsin werewolf and the Michigan dogman, but that summer of 1999 or 2000, when we drove our RV into western Pennsylvania, we found out that they have a dogman over there, too. Before I even tell you about this difficult summer that we endured, I want to say that I do believe the dogman is, in fact, some sort of canine. I don't think it's a kind of a Sasquatch, nor do I think it's a kind of a human. I don't suppose I can speak for all dogman witnesses, but at least the kind that hounded me and Marge was most definitely a new or different kind of a canine. Why do I insist upon this? Because it acted like a dog. At least, it acted like this one dog I had when I was younger, before I met my wife. This dog, who my father named Red Barker for some reason I forget, was very nosy, and he would interrupt me during private moments. If I wanted to be alone with a girlfriend, he wanted to sit in front of us and stare. That sort of thing. He had no boundaries, which caused me to feel like I was the one living in a cage, and that I was on display. Most dogs love you just for feeding them, but Red Barker acted like the Alpo was my offering to him as ruling demigod. I remember trading him to my cousin for a fish tank with tropical fish. Best trade of my life. So what does my spooky pet from decades ago have to do with this story? Well, this dogman was every bit as nosy as old Red Barker. Marge and I have pieced the order of events together. So we think it might have been Rustic Acres RV Resort and Campground, or some kind of place you park your RV in that part of northwestern Pennsylvania, that this all happened at. In those days, we still behaved much as we had as teenagers, and our goal was to find the spot to park furthest away from other families, especially families with kids. We wanted privacy so that we could, start our own family, if you catch my drift. Because of what happened to us later that summer, we now look for spots near the management office and near the exit, in case we need to get out of there fast. Those were never concerns of ours before we met the dogman. So we were renting our house in the summer and living out of our old school Winnebago. I called it our Shazam mobile because it looked like a more modern version of the vehicle that Billy and his man friend, Leisure Suit Larry over here, used to drive around in that 1970s superhero TV show. Anyway, that was our first RV, and it served us well, especially that summer. Now, normally we'd find a place to park and we'd only move out when it got too crowded, or when we just had to get back home. That summer, we were barely settled into the camp when on the first night, we found our most private of moments interrupted by a big, hideous-looking dog-like face glaring in the windows at us. I would have thought it was a mask, but the eyes were moving around, and they were exhibiting eye shine. Only animal eyes can do that, as far as I know. At least I'm certain it could not have been a human being. And the thing is, that head wasn't reaching up to look through that pane of glass in our direction. It was somehow leaning down to look in through a window that most canines should not have been able to reach up to. Marge was screaming, and Marge is not very easy to frighten. That kind of keyed me into action, and I grabbed the weapon we travel with to defend ourselves. Running outside, I ran all the way around the RV, but I couldn't see that big dog anywhere I looked. Some guy came out of his RV and started yelling at me to put on some clothes, that there were decent people living there and that sort of thing. But I hadn't even realized I'd forgotten to throw on some shorts before I ran outside. I asked him if he'd seen a very, very tall dog with upright pointed ears and the hugest mouth of fangs that ever there was. And this guy? And he looked at me as though I had 7 or 12 heads. In fairness, at the time I was thinking the dog was 7 or 8 feet tall at the shoulder, as in quadrupedal or four-legged. I hadn't understood at that point that the canine in question was a bipedal one that walked upright on his 2 hind legs. No wonder this guy's eyes got wide, and I could tell he thought I was insane. He spent as much time looking at my weapon as at me, and he started speaking quietly and reassuringly to me. I realized I now had a bigger problem than the tall dog, because this guy was probably going to report me as a deranged, weapon-wielding naked lunatic to either the camping management or, more likely, the local authorities. When he terminated our conversation, I jumped in the RV and asked Marge to plot out a course to a different place to park our RV, because we had run out our welcome at that location. Now, there are a number of campgrounds just south of the Allegheny National Forest, and by the middle of the next day, we found ourselves situated at one of those. We ate, then passed out until the next day, feeling much better and more relaxed. That night, however, Marge couldn't get to sleep. She insisted there was someone outside, tapping, on the top of the RV. I told her that if anything was tapping on top, it was probably a bird or a squirrel, but she insisted she was hearing heavy footfall outside as well. I wanted to go outside and look, but she told me we should play dead, unless it does something worse. By worse, I think she meant that if it showed itself to us, we should probably do something about it. I'm not 100% certain of what. I know she didn't want me running outside naked again, that much was for certain. So, we had a hard time sleeping that night, and Marge insisted we peel out of there in the morning. While not being able to sleep the night before, I did some calculations in my head. If we drove about 150-200 miles away, it would take that Dogman probably a day and a half to find us if he walked without sleeping. So the trick to staying ahead of the Dogman would be to only stay one night per 200 miles distance. If we drove twice as far away, then we could stay there twice as long. Neither of us ever considered giving up and going home. We were going to figure out that creature's radius per day, and then just avoid it. And it worked. For a while. We were making a tour of Pennsylvania, heading toward New Jersey, which we have read is a very weird place. Marge decided she wanted to head back toward the Midwest, since our summer was a little more than half over already. I think it was somehow the decision to double back that caused this problem to start itself over, from scratch. I forget where we were, but it was not an official campground, I remember that much. We had both gotten too tired to drive one night, so we found a little dirt road off the highway, drove our RV under a big tree, so we hoped nobody would see us, especially from the road, and then we both fell asleep pretty quickly. It was well after midnight when we both woke up to the RV being shaken back and forth. I grabbed my weapon, but Marge talked me out of using it. She said I should start the engine up and drive us out of there before we got tipped over. I jumped up front to do as she suggested, and what did I see running around from the side of the RV to look directly through the windshield in at me? Well, it wasn't a giant dog 7 foot tall at the shoulder. It was an upright standing, kind of a hairy creature, with that same kind of canine head we had seen staring in at us that time when we were having an intimate moment. In fact, this had to be the same exact one. It wasn't harassing us randomly. It knew who we were. I mean, it remembered us from before, you know, in that way that dogs never forget someone they've met. The thing I had been visualizing as a moose-sized four-legged dog was actually an upright walking bipedal werewolf or dogman, and that dogman's glowing eyes were staring at me. At least it had stopped rocking the RV. I tried the engine, then I tried it again and again until it turned over. Now all I had to do was maneuver around this 7-foot-tall freak of nature in front of us, and everything was going to be Jake. The thing is, the dogman werewolf guy wasn't in the mood to back out of my way. I tried moving the RV forward a little bit, and he just stood there, as though he had been cemented into place. I gunned the engine, and he just looked curious. I beeped the horn, and by then, I started hearing one of the other campers swearing at me. The shouting seemed to agitate the dogman, so I beeped again. The creature looked left and right, as complaints came from 2 or 3 directions, and lights were turning on, left, right, and center. I just kept beeping. When a couple of guys started marching angrily toward us through the dark night, holding something dangerous looking in their hands, the dogman took off. And then so did I, waving thanks out the window to our unlikely rescuers. They had no idea they saved us from the North American upright walking canid, or dogman. So Marge called a friend of hers about this who looked up Dogman for us. We were informed that the thing might follow us home. This might never end. We might be being haunted by the thing for life. So we decided that we had to get a little radical. We took the car to a relative of mine in New Jersey. The area he lives in would be too urban for the dogman to ever visit. There, the car was cleaned and fumigated and left with my relative. My hope was that our scent would be mostly removed from the vehicle by that point. Marge and I continued onward via public transportation to visit New York City for a week or 2. We returned home via air and bus, while my relative drove our RV back to our home, taking a vacation for himself and his girlfriend in the process. He said he saw no monsters of any kind on the drive there, and that was the last we've seen of the dogman or any other kind of cryptid. So, like I said before, we didn't even miss one summer getting back out there, although we stuck to the Midwest from then on, never heading as far east as Pennsylvania ever again. Marge told me she still has nightmares about that dogman. It seems like at least once or twice every month she still relives the trauma of the night that Dogman looked into my RV. As badass as a peace accord, 0718 Dragon Lord. Please join me in thanking 0718 Dragon Lord for making this episode possible. To explain the cool perks you can receive in return for helping us survive, here's international TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.